It finally happened. The DC Extended Universe has officially come to a close with the release of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, and thus the DC Comics-inspired world that Zack Snyder constructed is officially over. Say what you will about Snyder's vision for the DCU, something the franchise had strayed too far from by its end, but there's no denying that his take on Batman was a powerful one. Though Ben Affleck's portrayal was criticized by some over the years, the truth is that Snyder fully understood the Dark Knight's place in a world full of gods and monsters, and it showed. The DCU Batman's reaction to Superman makes sense. A common criticism of Zack Snyder's interpretation of Batman was that the character philosophically sides with Lex Luthor, Jesse Eisenberg, after the events of Man of Steel before eventually coming around and seeing Superman, Henry Cavill, as a friend and ally rather than a threat. Longtime DC Comics fans awaited a live-action partnership between the Dark Knight and the Man of Steel since the earliest days of the world's finest team-up, and many were undoubtedly disappointed that the pair were on opposite sides of the crime-fighting coin for the majority of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. But Snyder was onto something here. It just took a few hours for it all to fall into place. The truth of the matter is that Batman is a skeptical character. Trust isn't something that comes easy to him, even concerning his closest friends and allies. Hardened by the loss of his parents and the countless other personal tragedies resulting from his crusade against crime, the first time Bruce Wayne saw godlike creatures nearly decimate Metropolis, it's understandable that he would see Superman as a threat, even if he ultimately saved the world from General Zod, Michael Shannon. Bruce trained harder, attained some kryptonite, and built an arsenal and mech suit with the sole purpose of stopping Superman once and for all, knowing that he was outmatched at every turn. Considering the way Lex Luthor manipulated and played upon his own failures, it's not surprising, or even out of character, that Batman would become more violent in his quest to defend the world, misguided as it may be. But what makes even more sense concerning Snyder's depiction of the Caped Crusader in Batman v Superman is that Superman eventually inspires Bruce to become a better hero, not unlike the countless times the character has done so in the comics. Stories like Superman/Batman, Public Enemies, Batman, Noel, and the Rebirth-era Justice League series, to name only a small few, all emphasize this very notion, and likewise, Snyder ends Dawn of Justice the same way. No wonder the movie had two titles, each reflecting an opposing stage of the dynamic between Batman and Superman. Even in comics where Batman is distrustful of Superman at the start, such as John Byrne's iconic The Man of Steel miniseries, which Snyder's take on Superman often pulls from, eventually they come to a mutual understanding that foreshadows their future friendship. This is also true in the DCU, and by the time Batman and the Justice League resurrect Superman, the pair have become more than just allies, but friends. Bruce even buys back a local Smallville bank to make sure Clark's mother doesn't lose her home. And it's that redemption arc, that journey away from brooding loner to inspiring leader, that only happens in the DCU because of Superman. No, not every interpretation of Batman is inspired by Superman to be a better hero, but considering Batman was only created after the success of Superman in the late 1930s. The end of Batman v Superman serves as a clever nod to how one character's heroism led to another's. The entirety of Zack Snyder's Justice League emphasizes how Ben Affleck's Batman has taken what he's learned from Superman's example and put it to good use. Like most comic book depictions of Batman, and even some animated ones, such as the DC Animated Universe version of the character, the DCU Dark Knight takes a particular interest in leading, funding, and supporting a team of metahuman superheroes, all of which are more powerful than himself. Rather than being threatened by these godlike beings, Bruce learns to understand their power and direct it. Moments like the League's first battle with Steppenwolf, Kieran Hines, where he inspires the Flash, Ezra Miller, into action. Or when the League brings Superman back from the grave later on, reveal Batman's complex understanding of the evolving world around him. Batman is quick on his feet, and Affleck's interpretation might be the quickest of all given what he's pitted against. Not unlike Batman in the famed comic book story JLA, Tower of Babel, Affleck's Bruce learns everything he can about his superhero contemporaries beforehand, seen in Suicide Squad, which is one of the most Batman-like things he could do. Many of the best live-action Batman stories invoke material from the original comic books. The Dark Knight echoes stories such as The Long Halloween, while the Batman plays with Batman, Year One, and Batman, Ego. It's only natural then that Zack Snyder's Batman would reflect stories such as Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns, which pits Batman against Superman for a time, or A Death in the Family, which focuses on Batman's grief following the death of the second Robin. Ironically, in the case of the latter, it's Superman who ultimately shows up to help Batman work through his grief, just like in the DCU. But instead of directly adapting any one comic book, like The Flash attempted to do with Flashpoint, Snyder took from his favorite Batman stories and pulled them together to form something new. By the time Justice League rolled around, Snyder's version, not the bad one, Batman was taking cues from the character's portrayals in books like the original Justice League International, Grant Morrison's JLA, and the New 52. Working hard to save the world despite all odds. The way that Batman commands respect from his enemies and his peers alike, including a budding friendship with Wonder Woman, Gal Gadot, reminded us of the character we knew from the Justice League animated series, albeit with a more mature tint. Admittedly, it takes the DCU Batman a little while to stop killing compared to most comic book depictions. Sure, some of the earliest Batman stories, and a few others since, have made Batman not only judge and jury but also executioner, but that's not the norm for the character. But by Justice League, inspired by the deceased Man of Steel and his example, Bruce doesn't kill his enemies going forward, at least those that aren't mindless alien husks, that is, showing that the character has taken steps to reform himself.